The anatomy of the choke point, environmental determinism, maritime fortification, and the biological imperative of the gate. Chapter 4, Fortification, the Iron Sentinels. Act 1, The Hook. To understand the profound fragility of the modern global economy, one must first examine a map of the world not as a colorful patchwork of political borders, but as a living, breathing circulatory system of resource flows. At the very heart of this vast global network lies a geographic accident of monumental consequence, known to us as the Strait of Hormuz. Dictated entirely by the ancient collision of tectonic plates, this narrow waterway connects the hydrocarbon-rich shores of the Middle East to the insatiable energy markets of Asia and Europe. At its most constricted point, the strait is a mere 20 miles wide, functioning as a hyper-concentrated geographic bottleneck that forces massive vessels into two dedicated shipping lanes, each only 2 miles wide and separated by a 2-mile buffer zone. Through these tightly confined waters flow approximately 20 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum products every single day, an astonishing volume that represents nearly 20% of total global oil consumption. Furthermore, 112 billion cubic meters of liquefied natural gas, largely originating from Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, must traverse this passage annually. It is an artery of such absolute, vital importance that any constriction, whether triggered by a natural disaster or by human fortification, sends immediate, cascading shocks throughout the entirety of the human species. Floating within this incredibly narrow and vital maritime corridor are a few seemingly insignificant geological outcrops. The most strategically vital of these formations are the islands of Abu Musa, the Greater Tunb, and the Lesser Tunb. To the untrained eye, these are merely harsh, sun-baked patches of rock, salt, and earth protruding from the sea, historically utilized by local populations for raising cattle or mining red iron oxide. Yet, when viewed through the uncompromising lens of environmental determinism, these islands reveal themselves as the ultimate geographic anchors in an otherwise fluid and untamable environment. They sit directly adjacent to the deepwater shipping lanes that are absolutely required to accommodate the massive drafts of modern supertankers. Whoever controls these specific, isolated square miles of rock possesses the physical capability to dictate the survival and prosperity of distant empires. Recognizing this supreme geographic advantage, Iranian military forces seized Abu Musa and the Tunbs on the 30th of November, 1971, a strategic maneuver executed just 2 days prior to the formal establishment of the United Arab Emirates. Since that moment, the United Arab Emirates has relentlessly protested the occupation, citing international law and colonial-era agreements, but the sheer physical reality of military possession has consistently superseded diplomatic theory. Over the subsequent decades, and accelerating drastically during the intense geopolitical conflicts of the 2020s, the Islamic Republic of Iran transformed these isolated geological formations into unsinkable aircraft carriers. A tiny island cannot be torpedoed, it cannot be sunk, and its foundations are rooted permanently in the bedrock of the earth itself. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy recognized this undeniable environmental advantage and initiated a massive, relentless engineering campaign to militarize the islands. Today, the once barren landscapes of Abu Musa and the Tunbs bristle with dozens of advanced missile defense and air defense systems, meticulously positioned to project lethal force across the water. They serve as heavily fortified forward operating bases for fast attack and assault vessels armed with high-velocity cruise missiles. This transformation represents a perfect, terrifying convergence of modern military engineering and ancient geographic fortune. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has deliberately utilized the harsh, unforgiving topography of the region to shield its most lethal strategic assets from destruction. Excavating deep into the limestone and salt formations of the islands and the adjacent coastal mountains, military engineers have constructed vast, complex subterranean labyrinths commonly referred to as missile cities. These subterranean fortresses are marvels of modern excavation, with some facilities buried up to 500 meters below the surface of the Earth. Within these cavernous depths, they house sophisticated ballistic missiles with ranges extending over 1,200 miles, safely insulated from the devastating reach of conventional aerial bombardment. This relentless militarization has created what is effectively an impenetrable iron ring around the gate of the Persian Gulf. The proximate tension of this geographic reality finally erupted into open, catastrophic warfare in the early months of 2026. As regional conflicts rapidly escalated, inevitably drawing in the military forces of the United States and Israel, the true strategic and economic value of these island fortresses became starkly apparent to the entire world. In direct response to the threat of a complete maritime blockade, the United States Central Command launched devastating, coordinated airstrikes against Iranian anti-ship cruise missile sites located along the strait and directly on the contested islands themselves. To penetrate the deep geologic armor of the Iranian missile cities, the United States Air Force was forced to deploy the GBU-72 bunker buster, an immense 5,000-pound penetrating warhead attached to a highly sophisticated precision guidance kit. Delivered by heavy strike fighters and strategic bombers, these massive munitions were explicitly designed to burrow through more than 100 feet of solid earth and reinforced concrete before detonating their explosive payloads. The deployment of such extreme, earth-shattering ordnance underscores a fundamental truth of human conflict and geography. When a land-based power fully embeds its weaponry into the very geology of a strategic choke point, dislodging them requires a localized re-engineering of the Earth itself. The sheer amount of kinetic energy required to neutralize a threat hidden within a mountain of salt and rock demonstrates the ultimate supremacy of defensive geography over offensive technology. Yet, despite the unprecedented application of overwhelming aerial firepower, the mere existence and threat of the island fortresses has achieved their ultimate strategic goal: interdiction. The islands of Abu Musa and the Tumbs allow a regional power to hold the entire global economy hostage without necessarily firing a single shot at a commercial vessel. The mechanism of this hostage-taking is not necessarily physical military destruction, but overwhelming economic paralyzation. As military tensions peaked in March of 2026, the Strait of Hormuz effectively ceased to function as a reliable trade route for the international community. Maritime insurance premiums experienced a catastrophic, steep rise, rendering the passage of commercial vessels financially unviable for many major shipping syndicates. The daily volume of traffic through the strait, which typically saw well over 100 vessels per day in times of peace, plummeted precipitously as captains and corporations refused to risk their multi-million-dollar assets. The devastating ripple effects of this geographic interdiction clearly demonstrate the highly interconnected fragility of modern human societies. With three-quarters of the region's oil blocked at the strait, and with alternative pipeline routes via Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates offering a mere fraction of the required daily capacity, global energy prices surged dramatically. By mid-March of 2026, Brent crude prices had spiked by an astonishing 39%, confidently crossing the severe economic threshold of $110 per barrel. Because liquefied natural gas shipments completely stalled due to the lack of alternative export routes, massive production facilities in Qatar were forced to shut down entirely as their storage capacities reached maximum physical limits. This in turn paralyzed the global agricultural supply chain, as the Middle East exports up to 30% of the world's granular urea fertilizers. The Dutch TTF natural gas futures rose by 59%, and urea futures increased by 34%, virtually guaranteeing a massive future spike in global food inflation. Furthermore, nations heavily reliant on Middle Eastern energy, such as Japan, which sources over 90% of its oil from the region, found their national security severely compromised by the militarization of a few tiny islands located thousands of miles away. The blockade also threatened the fundamental food security of the import-reliant Middle Eastern nations themselves, which import 77% of their rice and 91% of their vegetable oils. The global system, so dependent on seamless transit, began to buckle under the pressure of localized geographic control. From a deeply analytical and historical perspective, this escalating crisis illustrates a profound concept regarding human development. The proximate cause of the global economic shock is clearly the exchange of cruise missiles and bunker-buster bombs between rival nation-states. However, the ultimate cause is entirely environmental and geographic in nature. It is the inescapable physical reality that 20% of the energy required to power modern human civilization must squeeze through a 20-mile gap in the Earth's crust, a gap eternally guarded by immovable geological sentinels. The modern militarization of Abu Musa and the Tums is simply the latest human adaptation to this permanent geographic truth. It demonstrates that while our technology has advanced to the point of splitting the atom and communicating across the globe, our fundamental reliance on specific, navigable pathways across the Earth's surface remains exactly as pronounced as it was during the dawn of the Bronze Age. The Iron Ring is merely the modern expression of an ancient imperative to control the physical gateways of the world.